Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast explores the transition to net zero and the systems driving real change in how we move, live and power our world. Every week I sit down with the people leading that change, those offering insight, innovation and impact in many ways people don't fully see until they hear their stories. If you're ready for real conversations that inspire action and drive change, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey, and let's cut through the noise and build a better future together. Okay, so today I have with me Ben Nelmes, and he is the Executive Director of New Automotive. Thanks for joining me, Ben. It's lovely to have you on here. We've been trying to do this for a little while, haven't we?
We have, yeah. It's good to finally join you.
So Exec Director of New Automotive, which you co-founded back in 2020, but before that, you worked in public policy, didn't you? And I was absolutely really intrigued with your LinkedIn profile, because I always kind of do a little bit of a troll when I'm talking to somebody. Do you want to just talk about what you did before starting New Automotive, and actually what was it that gave you the impetus to start it?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm happy to. So yeah, you're right. My background is in public policy, and I guess specifically in working in climate and energy policy. So I did a variety of roles, but one of which was quite sort of crucial to forming New Automotive was I worked for the chair of the House of Commons Environment Committee, and I helped her in her role steering through all of these different parliamentary inquiries into different environmental issues, and because of that job that she had, we would get lobbied all the time by environmental NGOs and by other groups to look at specific issues, and I was always struck by how few organisations were urging us really to think about the UK's transition to electric vehicles, or indeed, the transition overall, the impact for road users or for the automotive industry, and how indeed it was going to happen. And we would have these progress reports from the Committee on Climate Change that they produce every year and hand back to Parliament, and that's part of the UK's kind of climate change governance arrangements, is that the Parliament gets these annual reports, and we would get them on our desk, and I'd look at them and think, well, look, it's another year of great progress in the electricity generating sector, where you have emissions coming down very rapidly, but still oil demand and emissions from road transport, just another year of stagnation and flatlining and sitting at this huge level and not really anything starting to eat away at it. And when you compare that to the relatively fast timescales that sit behind the UK's climate change targets, it struck me that there was increasingly some need for government to do something about this and to have a bit more of a plan. But sometimes in order for that to happen, I think it takes civil society and NGOs to be playing a really active role in highlighting that there are things that government can do and that there is a need for government to act. And that was really the impetus for me behind setting up New Automotive along with my co-founders. And I was expressing these frustrations to somebody who worked in a philanthropic foundation once over lunch, and they came back to me and said, well, look, if you're able to get something together, we might be interested in funding it if you can get a proposal together. So that's really, the rest is kind of went from there, as they say. So that was the genesis of New Automotive, and I think the other thing was really in terms of the work that we actually do. I was always very impressed with organisations that were able to use data to tell stories to back up their campaign. So it wasn't just there's this particular issue, or this thing is all really bad, or this thing's not working. It was, here's some actual insight and evidence to support some of the solutions that are being proposed, or highlight the success that sometimes gets forgotten about. So data has always been a really crucial part of what we do at New Automotive, and really you could sum up everything we do as telling stories with data.
And actually, you kind of provide a monthly recap of kind of information on EVs, don't you? And I was just going to say, from my point of view, my background is in business improvement and continuous improvement, and data is key to all of this, because actually otherwise it's just gut feel, isn't it? and trying to get people to do something about it when you've just got gut feel. It doesn't work like that. So this is brilliant. But this month, well, sorry, no, last month now, because we're now in July. I've got confused which month I'm in. For June, your latest publication was, or your report was talking about, we've now, so the sales were 1 in 4 EVs.
Yeah.
That just blew my mind, to be honest.
Yeah, it's crazy to think,
Good.
isn't it? I think back in the days of 2020, we would look at the makeup of the new car market in the UK, and it just seemed unimaginable that we'd ever get to a situation where 1 in 4 would be fully electric in normal times as well, outside of the pandemic. So yeah, it's amazing progress, and it shows as well what can be done and what can be achieved when the conditions are right, and I think it should give it should give ministers a great deal of heart to see that the UK is able to do this, and also I think there's a great lesson in this for other similar automotive markets, other similar countries out there that are looking at their progress towards electrification, and perhaps looking for ways to speed it up. And actually, I think the UK is emerging as a real case study of success, which is fantastic.
So if we just go to the 1 in 4 point, and then I want to go through all the other stuff that you do, but this just blew me, like I say, it blew me away. What made up the numbers of that 1 in 4? Were there any signs that it would? I mean, because it's not. Is it? I don't know which. I don't know where a automotive is. Whether it's kind of classed as half year, or whether the year end is kind of end of March. So I don't know that bit. But actually, what stats did you see running up to that, and what was this 1 in 4?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, it was really groundbreaking. It was significantly up on the. If you compare it to the June in 2024, where battery electric cars, I think, were around 19% of new sales, and now they're 25%. That's they're growing, growing significantly. It's over 40% growth rate. I mean, very little in the UK economy grows at a rate of 40% in a year. So it's really strong growth. And I think it's a really significant shift. It's certainly it's the strongest month for electric car sales in the year so far. There have been months where we've had higher EV sales, but it's not really fair to compare June with a December, or because the car market has a great deal of seasonality, I think is the term that you would use to say that each month is quite unique, because there are targets that people are meeting at the end of each quarter, at the end of each half. There are also the months where the number plate changes over, where we tend to see car sales car registrations going significantly higher. So yeah, it was in terms of what was driving it. I mean, I think two things, broadly speaking, were responsible for the really impressive stat. One was the fact that Tesla, which has always been the UK's market-leading brand for electric cars, they had quite a strong month, and they saw growth of over 10% on their sales in June last year, after quite a difficult period for the company. And that was, I think there's a variety of reasons for why we've seen their sales grow in June, but one of which is certainly part of it is that they released their updated Model Y, which has proven to be quite popular, so that's good. But I think the bigger thing driving the growth is also the fact that we're now seeing a bunch of brands that have not been traditionally leaders in electrification now getting sort of very, very active in this space, and they're growing their sales. So one of the biggest EV sales growth is being seen by Ford. So Ford has not been a leader in this area, but their sales in 2025 overall are up over 300% on what they were in 2024. So it's huge growth. Yeah, by the end of June last year, they'd sold something like 2,000, a little over 2,000 electric cars. That's now over 10,000 this year. So it's they're going gangbusters with their EV models.
Yeah. But I
As are
suppose
a bunch of
on,
other.
haven't they? They've
Yeah,
added
yeah.
on to their number of EVs that going, out there. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, they've got a range of new models, and they're selling really well, and that success is fantastic. And then there are a bunch of other brands as well that are seeing significant growth, and of course we've seen the entry into the UK of a few new brands like BYD, and who are the second fastest growing in terms of their EV sales so far this year. And almost 1 in 20 new electric cars in 2025 was a BYD, so they are a significant part of the market. But equally, Peugeot, Skoda, these names that have been with us for a very long time, they are all seeing very, very rapid growth. And I think that reflects the fact that all car manufacturers now understand that this is the future for this market. But also the fact that the UK they see as a particularly high priority for sending their electric vehicles. So, and that's because we have an ambitious set of policies here in the UK.
So would you also say that there's a shift with regards to general mindset changes? Because, and I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, about kind of the levels of negativity that have been out there for a long time. There seems to be a bit of a shift in most media sources. There may be an odd one or two that is still kind of back in the arcade, in the past. But do you feel that there's kind of more mindset changes?
Yeah, definitely. I think minds are changing in across the country in various different corners where it's key as well. I mean, the consumers, consumer attitudes towards EVs are definitely shifting. I mean, there's a lot of research out there to show that consumer demand is growing quite strongly in the UK at the moment. I think that's driven partly by the fact that we have something like 1.6 million electric cars on the roads of the UK now. It's a lot of these cars are around, so people are getting exposed to them. They're getting friends who have them. They might get a lift from a friend in their electric car, and they'll ask them about how it's going. So their experience of an EV is no longer what they read in the newspaper. It's more first-hand. And that's really good. It means that people can have a much more realistic idea of what they are buying when they go and consider their next car. I think also in the media things are changing. We've seen a lot of, frankly, quite silly media coverage of EVs. As we see silly media coverage of a lot of issues. It's not a surprise at all. And that is now starting to change, I think, now as well. I think if you go back just a few years, EVs represented a real unknown quantity to people. And so therefore media scare stories or media sort of hyperbole, it generated interest. People thought, oh my goodness, are we actually going down the route of this technology when there are all these claimed problems about it? And now those stories are starting to meet with people's real experiences of the technology, and so therefore they're having less traction, and I expect that trend only to continue. So the media is changing as well, and then I think government has various different attitudes towards this technology at any one time. It's not, it doesn't think with one mind, but I think that there is also quite a strongly favourable view of this technology in government on balance. So, I think we are really seeing minds start to change. Yeah.
And I was going to say, it feels like at some point soon we're going to get to it, like you just said about, you'll know somebody who's got an EV, etc., etc. Feels like we're going to get to a tipping point, where kind of like there'll be a change in understanding, that you'll know more people who've got an EV and who have good experiences with it. So therefore those people can counter all that, Dave down the pub says this, that kind of comment.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so powerful because it's now Dave in the pub says this, but Mark in the pub says, actually, it's not that bad, and I'll get the next round in because I'm saving so much money on my, obviously that, might not be realistic because they might prefer to keep those savings, but yeah, I mean, people will learn that actually this technology has a huge number of benefits, and that's a really good thing, and it's the most powerful communications tool you can have is the power of somebody's genuine lived experience. So yeah,
Totally agree.
it's really good.
So you've also got on your website, you've got a ZEV mandate tracker, and I
Mm.
talked to you before, and we kind of got talking around the time that I had Colin Walker on the podcast talking specifically about ZEV, and I suppose because there's a number of data tools that you've got on your website, we can talk
Mm.
about some of this anyway. But the ZEV mandate tracker seems it's really interesting, but it would be good to kind of understand your thoughts on ZEV now that it's been embedded for a few months, and
Mm.
just your kind of I suppose from a, and I talked to Colin about this before, from a lobbying point of view, there were lots of OEMs, lots of vehicle manufacturers that were lobbying for some kind of leniency or flexibility in, kind of the zero emission vehicle mandate, weren't there? And the flexibilities have been put in there. What are your thoughts on what those are doing? Are they doing anything? Or is everybody just going ahead and kind of going, well, we knew what we were doing anyhow, so.
Well, look. I mean, I suppose one thing is that we might not. One thing, to get clear on to begin with, is that we might not see the impact of the changes that have been announced right away. The car market can react quite quickly to things, but most of the time, decisions about the supply of vehicles are taken months ahead of time, and then it's not an industry that can really turn on a sixpence like that. And then the other thing to remember is that in April we had this announcement of some changes to the zero emission vehicle mandate, but we have not seen the legislation, because this is a policy that exists in law and is set out in law. That law has to change, and we haven't seen how those changes are exactly going to be introduced. And I know that different companies will take different approaches. Some will start to change their plans when government announce some changes. Others will want to see legislation actually passed and approved, and the letter of that, and to take a view before they take a view and before they start to act. So it's we might not see the changes right away, but then I suppose if we go on to what are my reflections on what the changes themselves actually mean, well, the UK before the announced changes, the UK had one of the most ambitious set of targets for EV uptake in the world. They were more ambitious than our European peers. They were more ambitious than North America. And I believe that they were more ambitious actually than China's targets for EV uptake as well.
Okay.
So we had a really ambitious set of targets. The changes, I think, will mean that we will keep most of that ambition, so that's good. But we will lose some of the clarity about how the market will change between now and the end point, which is 2035, when we'll have a car market that comprises only zero emission vehicles. So we had targets that were set out that were very hard. They were very, there weren't other ways to meet them. You had to meet them through selling zero emissions cars and zero emissions vans. For most of the years between now and 2035, those targets are now a little bit fuzzier, you might say, in that there are other ways to meet them that mean that the zero emission vehicle sales can be below the target, the headline target, and yet the company is still complying. So it's harder to see the precise nature of that car market and how it's going to evolve over the coming few years. And I think it's in that period, for the remainder of this decade, where we are most likely to see the impacts of the changes that were announced. But there is significant uncertainty, and that has been introduced by the changes that the government announced.
I was going to say, because that's sort of that 2029 date with regards to the sort of like some flexibilities being kind of integrated into what ZEV looks like now. And like you say, it's not physically written just yet, but that kind of, I because it's, can you just explain that? Colin talked about this before, but can you just explain a little bit about the run up to 2029 and what that difference is in those flexibilities?
Yeah, certainly. So the targets as they stand. So for those who aren't familiar with the detail of the policy who are listening, the way the targets work is that each year has a target. So for this year, the target is 28%, and that target goes up each year until 2035. And the target for 2030 is 80%. So in 2030, a car maker has to make sure that 80% of its new car sales are zero emission. Now, there's no real other way to meet that target in 2030. I mean, you know, a car maker can, if they beat some targets in previous years, then they can sell slightly short of that 80% and use some of that to help. But for that 80% target is pretty hard. The target in the year previously, from memory, so I'm actually just going to double check what that target is. But from memory, I think it's 66%.
Because it's quite a big jump now, isn't it?
It's so 66% is the target in 2029. So it's already a substantial jump from 66% to 80%. But actually, there are flexibilities in 2029 that won't exist in 2030, which mean a car maker could sell significantly less than 66%. In fact, it might be something in the region of 55% of their car sales. So to go from 55% to 80%, that's a very big jump. And a jump like that carries a cost for a car maker. You know, that will require quite a lot of investment. Yeah. It's achievable. You know, it's doable. So we shouldn't think we've set ourselves an impossible target here, but it's achievable only under certain conditions. And one of those conditions is that the car makers know for certain that target will never change, because that way they will build plans and invest capital around that target. You know, what we're talking about here, you know, we talk about car sales changing, but there's a huge industry that sits behind all of these different car sales. It's battery manufacturing and vehicle assembly, or it's internal combustion engine manufacturing and all of the connected parts of that supply chain. And actually, what we need is for the car companies to start investing much more in battery manufacturing and to start making plans for what they're going to do with their internal combustion engine manufacturing production lines. And that is a big, big change, and it affects a lot of people's lives. You know, this is a really serious transition that we're talking about here. And so, therefore, you need absolute certainty that policy is not going to change. But by introducing a change back in April, nobody is ever going to be quite as certain as they were that target won't move. So there has been a little bit of harm done there. So government really needs to start creating a lot of assurance that those future targets aren't going to change anymore. And that way we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to make that jump. I think government really needs to acknowledge that is. That's a big task that they need to take on.
It's put a bit of a wobble in it, hasn't it, really? You know, to me, if, like you've kind of said, the car manufacturers that are already doing well, and I said this to Colin, I asked this question of Colin earlier on in the year, you know, the ones that are doing well, are they really going to stop, you know, and look and kind of go, oh, well, we're just going to adjust it, you know, because a lot of them because they take such a long time for these kind of the manufacturing, you know, to, and like you said, the supply chain all to go put in place. Really, is there any point, can they, you know, in some ways it just feels like if they just carry on as if it was how it was previously, then the ones that are doing well are going to keep doing well, because why would you take your foot off the accelerator, as it were, because this has been put in place. Because if you still sell, if you still keep on the old targets, then actually, if your aim is to meet those targets, then surely that's the best thing, isn't it?
Yes, so I think I agree that car makers who have already invested and who are producing a lot of electric cars, they will continue to do so. I don't think there's a situation in which we'll see established battery car production closing down. What however is likely, which is a risk for the UK, is that those cars will go elsewhere. There are lots of countries in the world for whom increased electric car sales are just a benefit. Countries that have no vehicle manufacturing presence in any real, in any significant degree, but also companies that also don't have any oil production as well. These net importers of oil are going to see only the upside of this transition, because they'll have no jobs transition to deal with themselves. They'll have a balance of payments deficit where their energy imports are concerned, and so electric vehicles will help solve that problem, and they will quite happily take those vehicles. The UK, I think, has to remember that the economic benefit of getting the transition to electric vehicles right is not in whether or not we have 2, 3, 4 gigafactories here employing so many thousands of people. It's not in whether or not we have car plants here. It's whether or not we have electric vehicles in the hands of households and businesses who currently use and spend money on fuel, who are going to start benefit from the running cost savings. That's where we'll get the productivity benefits, and that's where we'll get the balance of payments benefits. And that is a huge boost to any country that is a major economy in Europe that can move faster than its peers in this transition will see a big boost as a result of that to the performance of its economy. So it's a real chance to get ahead. So yeah, there are huge upsides here.
Yeah, let's just, like I say, let's just hope that kind of everybody keeps pushing forwards. There still needs to be, in my mind, mindset changes with certain, because I've had experience of this myself. Dealerships actually wanting to push electric vehicles and having champions in there to kind of to manage and be enthusiastic about this, so, and I know that's part of the scenario, isn't it, really? But we've got to be pushing. There's got to be that mindset change there as well as everywhere else.
Yeah, indeed, and I think I think there are a few more minds to change, I'm sure. But my hope is that parts of the automotive retail sector will start to realise that if they don't get ahead of this, this trend is inevitable, and these trends can come faster than you think. And if they don't get ahead of it, then they'll find themselves falling behind and missing out on a slice of the future car market. So it's really imperative that dealerships, that anybody who's in the business of selling a car is on the lookout for how they're thinking through how they're going to adapt to the car market of the future and getting ahead of that trend.
I mean, people, in general, there's kind of a known fact that people don't like change.
Yeah.
And I remember listening to, I can't remember, I think it was Radio 4 or Talk, I can't remember, one of the talk radios or something like that, just over a year ago now, and the people, going back to what people thought about EVs, and I know that there's still people thinking about this in some ways, but there was a chap on this radio show, and it was somebody who phoned in and said, we're being forced to do this, we've not had any kind of referendum or anything like that, but actually yes, it probably does feel like that to some people, especially if they're petrol heads and they've been driving a petrol or diesel car for a long time. But actually, I just say, get them in a car. get them in a
Yes.
car and and see what they think, just
Mm.
see the change, and yes, it's evolving technology, but it's
Hmm.
blooming good.
Yeah.
You've just got to give it a chance, really.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed, indeed, and I think the people will be surprised. Most people who haven't experienced this technology, when you give it a go, people are generally surprised on the upside, as it were. They have a positive surprise rather than a negative surprise. Um, so yeah, I do encourage everybody to take whatever opportunity you can to drive one. I mean, one of the things you can do these days, there are a lot of car rental options where you can get an electric car. So um, if you're going on a road trip, why not? Give it a go that way, and then you can try for
I've got a
yourself.
friend this week who's never test
Yeah,
driven an EV before,
yeah,
and she's always driven petrol, and she's
mm,
literally taking a few out for a test drive.
yeah,
And I said, look, do you want me to give you some steers in kind of the
yeah.
right direction of what maybe you could try? So I've given her a number of different cars just to try them out, just different brands, different levels, and
Mm,
just to kind of give her that understanding. But I've also, and this is what doesn't always happen, I've also given us some background on regen and
mm.
batteries and charging and things like that, because I think that bit is really important as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so many ways. Look, to buying any kind of car, there are so many ways to get caught out as a consumer, aren't there? And if you don't know what to look for, if you don't know, if you're unfamiliar to this, and so everybody is now with an electric car. Everybody is to some extent going back to what it was like when they bought their first car. And you don't know what's practical or what's going to work, and so the need for clear consumer information is really, it's really really important. Um, so yeah, it's those sorts of tips that you're dispensing are probably, there's probably a bigger market for them. So
But actually, I'm going to move now on to your 2025 cost of driving an electric report,
sure.
because that segues perfectly into it, doesn't it, Ben? And actually, the information that you've got in there, you are countering the kind of misinformation about EVs not being affordable. Can you just give me a little bit of background about
Mm.
the actual report? I know it was with Electric Vehicles UK and Jolt, wasn't it? But just give us some context to what that report actually entails.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So yeah, as you say, we should say it's this was a report we wrote for Electric Vehicles UK, and we produced it with them. And if you want to find it, it's on their website. We aim to really produce a as comprehensive as possible analysis of the the cost of owning and running an electric car versus a petrol equivalent. And so the key thing there is the equivalent. So we there are lots of attempts to do this kind of analysis where people look at cars that are not really comparable. We thought, when you're a consumer and you're going to buy a car, you're thinking about, do I need to fit my dog in the back? Have I got kids that I'm doing the school run? Am I doing a weekly shop? All of these things, these practical considerations. And so we built a set of comparisons. We found models of cars that people might realistically choose between, given different consumer profiles. And I think we looked at 400 to 500 different sets of comparisons in the new and used market, and being purchased through salary sacrifice arrangements as well in the new market, or being bought on finance in the used market. And the findings were really positive. We actually found that when you're looking at these sort of like-for-like comparisons, by and large, price parity has either been reached or is much, much closer than you might think. The only part of the market where really price parity has yet to be reached is in the new market when not getting a car on a salary sacrifice arrangement, and so
Mm,
therefore you don't get the tax
mm,
benefit. Um, but in the used market, price parity has been comfortably reached. Um, the only real area where you're going to face a cost that you wouldn't otherwise have with a petrol car is when you're buying a home charger to put on your house. But in almost every other area, they are cheaper. They're cheaper to buy, cheaper to run, and that's really good news. And actually, I think I was really pleased with the result in the used market because. To my mind, one of the big benefits that this transition will bring is that it will really help people with their fuel costs. We talk about fuel bills and fuel poverty in the UK, but we never consider one of the biggest expenses on fuel that people have, which is the transport fuel, as petrol. So the fact that this technology is going to become more widely available in the used market, where most people buy their cars, I think is really positive news. And to anybody who's looking at selling more EVs in the UK market, it's a good. The costs are now looking really good for the technology, and that's why we're seeing such strong uptake.
And it's funny. I was talking to a chap last Friday. I went to an event in Reading, just a little event, and he was looking at buying a used Polestar 2, and actually he was gobsmacked. And like I say, not everybody's got to drive. I get that, but he did, and he was gobsmacked when I told him how much it costs us to charge our car. We've got a smaller battery than a Polestar 2, but because I've had a Polestar 2 for a few weeks last year, I knew that it would be, just a few pounds to kind of do that, and it does make a difference, like you say. It does make a difference to actually recognise, that, like when I was driving my VW Golf, we were spending like £75 in petrol, kind of changing it to an EV, and yes, we've got less miles, but actually, charging from home the costs are just so much cheaper, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and convenient as well. I think people often think that charging is going to be this massive inconvenience, but actually, if you're able to charge at home, it's quite easy, and that is a benefit that you see reported back from EV owners, that they like the fact they can just plug in and leave it, rather than having to go to the petrol station.
Yeah, and even when you're public charging, yes, it's still kind of bedding in, and we need to make sure the customer experience improves in certain situations. But actually, when you're charging an EV, you can build it into your travel time. And actually, our son goes. I've talked about this before. Our son is at Exeter University, and that's 145 miles for us. And we build our charging into that because it's 3 hours in the car if we're going down the A303 from Reading, that is. But it's things like that. You can build it in because you want to have a little bit of a break. And actually, and I've talked about this on social media as well. We need to kind of fill these. We're all running so fast, aren't we, to do everything? We're all going at 100 miles an hour all the time. It's kind of forcing us to do it in some ways, but it doesn't take a lot of time. You can go and use have a comfort break, pick up a cup of tea, and come back, and it's charged. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, there's many aspects of this that are much more convenient and much more pleasant, which I think people are increasingly coming to appreciate. So yeah, it's really positive.
So can we now talk a little bit about? There is a bit of an elephant in the room, and we were talking about this before we started recording. And I know that this change probably happened after the report came out, and it's about the car tax increase.
Yes.
Because that's like I say. Sorry, I just think it feels a bit like a bag of spanners to me, because it's not really. I don't know what we were talking about. Is government moving in the right direction? And to me, that is just a bit. It's not. It's a bit of an anomaly. What do you reckon?
Well, so the changes to road tax. I mean, look, it's there was some quite hefty increases to road tax that came into effect in April. I think partly this just reflects the fact that we live in straitened times. The government is keen to raise tax revenue where it can, and taxes like road tax are the kind of places that a chancellor might look, which is which is painful and difficult, but equally that's kind of the situation we're in. I suppose that's the context for it. One of my takes on what changed in April was that the taxes on more polluting cars went up really significantly. So there was quite a there's now quite a big difference, a much bigger difference than there used to be. If you're looking at cars, if you're looking at say petrol cars that pollute much more versus petrol cars that are a bit cleaner and a bit more efficient, there's a bigger difference there. There's an even bigger difference between petrol cars that pollute a bit less and zero emissions cars and battery electric cars. The thing that I think is a little bit of a shame was the change that put up road tax on people who already own an electric car, that they're now paying the standard rate, which is the same as owners of a petrol or diesel or hybrid car. And I totally understand that electric cars ought to pay for using the roads, and it is right that in the long term electric car owners do pay. What does make it a bit of a shame is the fact that we have this system of road tax that changed back in the 2010s, and there was a change that was introduced around 2017, which was handled quite poorly and has created an anomaly. So if you have a car that dates to before 2017, it sits on a totally different tax regime to one that was registered after 2017.
Okay.
And so if you're looking in the used market and say you're considering buying a 2016 VW Polo diesel car, or you're considering buying a 2017 Renault Zoe electric, two quite similar three-door hatchbacks, then you're going to pay very, very different rates of tax. And the electric car will pay the standard rate of road tax, which I think is £190, £195, something like that. That VW Polo diesel is going to pay £20 a year in road tax. And the reason is that there was a change that was introduced back in that time, and they decided not to adjust the rates of tax paid by the old cars. This makes no sense to me, and I think it's not a sensible way to structure a tax system. I think there are much more sensible ways to structure road tax, where you could actually have a tax rate that depends on the overall energy efficiency of the vehicle, regardless of whether it's petrol, diesel or electric. So that the most efficient electric cars would pay less than the least efficient electric cars. And that's a really desirable outcome for us to have as a country, actually. And we don't have any way of discriminating between the efficiencies of electric cars in the tax system at the moment. And it's important because the least efficient electric cars consume twice as much energy per mile as the most efficient. And when you're thinking about the need for charging infrastructure, for new electricity generation capacity, new grid upgrades, all of these things can be minimised. These are all costs. They can all be minimised by having the most efficient electric cars on the road as possible. So it's a bit of a missed opportunity there, I think, a few years ago, to reform that tax system to make it work in a way that's more sensible. And actually we have a report that's on our website that looked at this. I think we published it last year, which suggested a way of reforming that system that would have been cost neutral for the Treasury. They could have increased revenue as much as it would have cost to offset the reductions elsewhere. So I think it's a system that sadly hasn't been thought through quite as well as it could have done. But ultimately I think the changes that came into effect in April, they're not going to derail this transition. They're just going to create a few frictions here and there.
It does feel like that what you've just said, and somebody was talking about this the other day, and I was thinking, I need to look into that, but you've just clarified it about the payment for tax before, say, 2017. To me, that is just not encouraging people with older vehicles that are more polluting to move over to electric. But then on the other side, There's no incentive. There's no incentive either place. Is that there's no incentive for them to move, but there's no incentive payment to actually help them with that, because usually, I'm saying usually, and I don't mean that to be a general statement, but a lot of the time people who go for cars before that age probably have had it second, third, fourth hand down, haven't they? They've bought it used because that's what they can afford. So really, we need to include people. This transition has got to be inclusive, hasn't it?
Indeed, yeah. And I mean, it's worth remembering that you will still, even if you went for that Renault Zoe, you'd still benefit financially. You'd still actually see a saving. The problem is that it requires the consumer to have really good knowledge about what the costs are going to be.
Yeah.
And if it's your first electric car, you're not going to have that knowledge. And you're going to see the higher road tax, and that's easy to understand. £195 a year versus whatever it is on the 2016 diesel. That's easy to understand. It's written on paper. Whereas the running cost savings of the Zoe, you're not going to see that so easily. So that, as I say, it creates a little friction, and it's not helpful. But ultimately, I still, it's not going to derail this either. So it would be helpful if the Treasury did something about it. Certainly, and it would make the car makers' lives easier as well if they did. But we need to always keep these problems in perspective as well, I think.
I agree. And do you know what? There's so much I could talk to you about that you've got on your website. So to everybody watching and listening, please look at the New Automotive website, because you have done so much, Ben. And I've kind of
Thank you very
said
much.
to you before we started talking. You're so well respected across the sector, and it's absolutely brilliant. I want to finish with one final question. So recently you've mentioned about celebrating the wins, and I want to ask you, what's one positive shift that you've seen recently that gives you hope that we are all moving in the right direction?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think really the thing that has really given me hope recently that we are moving in the right direction is just how quickly we're seeing electric car sales growing amongst those car makers who have been around a long time, those well-established brands. That just signals to me that they can see which way the wind is blowing, and that they are now trying to get ahead of this. When I look back over the last 5 years, I think in 2020 there was something of a hype around electric vehicles, and everybody got very excited, and then that sort of faded away, and it took car companies longer than they had planned to bring their models to market, to develop them. But now we are seeing the kind of the fruit of all of that hard work coming through now, and I think that is really positive. And the fact that the UK is a leading market for this, and we really are. If you look at the top 10 car markets by size, the UK is second only to China in the rate of uptake of electric cars. So we are a world leader on this, and we should remember that. And that's going to benefit us, and it's going to give us a huge advantage over our international competitors, and that's to be celebrated. So I do feel very hopeful about this transition. I think there are lots of... Sorry, you asked me for one thing that gives me hope, and I've given you about three there. That's because there are lots of reasons to be hopeful.
It's fine, absolutely. If you want to add another one, you can add another one. I'm open to 8 additionals, but like I say, that's my last question to you. So yeah, if there's anything else that's popped into your head, let me know.
I think we're all good, Liz.
No, thank you. But listen, it's been really, really interesting to talk to you, and you're doing some fantastic work. Delving into all the layers. You are like an onion, except you've not made me cry. In the fact that there are so many layers to what you do as an organisation, and it's just so we need to be keeping an eye on this. So like I say, to everybody watching and listening, you can sign up for the updates from New Automotive anyway. I will share all of your details on in the show notes. and just make sure that people know how to find you. But on that point, I just want to say thank you, Ben. It's been really, really interesting. So much to talk about.
Yeah, so much to talk about. I feel like we could have gone on much longer, but it's probably for everybody's benefits that we don't. So yeah, thank you, Liz. It's been a real pleasure.
So, and to everybody watching and listening, if you found this episode interesting, which I really hope you have, please share it. We'll be posting on LinkedIn and all the socials, and sign up, log in, do all the bits and pieces, subscribe, and just get the word out there about what New Automotive are doing. And on that point, I will say thank you for watching and listening. Thanks to Ben, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're a charge point operator, local authority or stakeholder in EV charging, I'd love to talk to you about our Charge Point Evolution framework. It's designed to help you create a seamless EV driver journey, boost utilisation and maximise your return on investment. Alternatively, if you know someone who'd be a great podcast guest or might be interested in sponsoring an episode, you can email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. Thanks again for watching.